It's March 2nd, 1933, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
Over the years, King Kong, which premiered Today in History in 1933, has been interpreted as an allegory for everything from the clash of ancient and modern to interracial romance. Not bad for a film which was inspired by its director looking up at a New York City skyscraper and thinking, it would be cool if there was a big gorilla on that.
Yeah, so it was released in the Great Depression and crowds had been lining up outside Radio City, drawn by the buzz of that particular image, an enormous ape on their main skyscraper at the time. And screenings were staged at the 6,200-seat Radio City Music Hall main theatre. But even that wasn't big enough for the anticipated crowds. So the film was also shown at Radio City's second theatre, the New Roxy, which could accommodate 3,500 more people. So you had 10,000 people watching this one film all simultaneously. And apparently once the film started, there were audible gasps as Kong roared onto the screen, in part thanks to the groundbreaking special effects, but also it had very, very carefully designed sound design that used the mixture of a lion and a tiger's growl to create his trademark sound. And so it was just this overwhelming sensory experience.
Well, the crowd had been whipped into a frenzy before the thing had even started because of the publicity. RKO absolutely blitzed this thing. There was a novelization. In 1933, they did a novelization pre-release. There was a twice per week, 15 minutes per episode radio adaptation before the film came out, so that people got used to the characters, which must have been a lot of rah! It must have been quite hard to listen to. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because now, obviously, everything these days is a franchise, including King Kong. It's astonishing to think that this was actually created at this point. It wasn't based on anything. It came out of Merian Cooper's brain, having had a dream of a giant ape on the side of the Empire State. And this was years before the film was made. It was just like percolating in his head, and he became a Hollywood executive and commissioned a screenplay. And the whole concept could only really have ever come to fruition at this point. Talking Pictures had only been going for 6 years. Monster movies had only really been going for 2. Todd Browning's Dracula and James Wales's Frankenstein were both released in 1931. So it's just hard to explain now what this felt like. But this was new. That's why it then sold out for 10 shows per day for the first 4 days at these 2 giant venues in New York. That is nearly 400,000 people buying tickets for the opening weekend, an all-time attendance record for any indoor attraction in America.
Yeah, and I thought I'd go and look at some of the reviews from the time, see if critics were wowed by this novelty on screen. And I have to say, I love old film reviews. They were so flat and aloof. And a lot of times, this was obviously before the concept of spoilers, because the first half of most reviews just summarises the plot right up to the ending on the Empire State Building. But I particularly enjoyed this from the Manchester Guardian. It says, dinosaurs and pterodactyls destroy most of the party, but the higher salaried principals survive to subdue the ape with gas bombs and ship it back to New York. The Guardian's critic thought that there was too much action in it. By the end, they said it was more like a comedy than a thriller because there were so many non-stop action sequences. But it did acknowledge the picture offered, quote, more thrills that have been manufactured for the screen since speech came to it. And it also, and this really caught my eye, criticised the special effects, which are now seen as being so revolutionary for the time. We look back and we think, wow, cinemagoers must have been completely awed by this, which I suppose the average cinemagoer probably was. But the Guardian review, although it acknowledges the technical craft, said, we wonder why the huge ape so rarely disturbs the foliage of the dense jungle. He moves in it as if superimposed. We notice that his size varies from scene to scene. And I just think, you guys aren't supposed to notice that. This is 1933.
That's funny. I remember seeing the first Jurassic Park and thinking special effects will never get any better than this.
Yes. Same with me in Independence Day. And you watch it now and you're like, I could make that on my phone. Yeah.
That's terrible. Yeah. Anyway, the guy behind the special effects that were being poo-pooed by the critics on this day was Willis O'Brien. He was a stop-motion pioneer known for his work on The Lost World in 1925, which was a dinosaur film. And he was responsible for animating King Kong and all the film's other creatures. He designed an 18-inch Kong model, which was covered in rabbit fur. It had flexible metal arms and skeleton inside, and his assistant...
It's a Wallace and Gromit-style figurine, basically.
Yeah.
Which shocked me. I thought, because I've been on the Universal Studios ride, and I've seen the giant Kong head from the end. I thought that's how they did it, but it's not how they did it. That's a lie. That's just like one shot. Most of it they did with little tiny figurines, like a claymation thing.
Yeah, and actually, so one of O'Brien's assistants, Marcel Delgado, he built an additional larger scale head and arms for close-up shots. So you did have this sort of alternative Kong that people could get close to. But the stop-motion process was incredibly painstaking in the way that it continues to be for Wallace and Gromit type productions. Each second of film required up to 24 individual frame adjustments. They had this quite innovative thing, which was that to create lifelike breathing, Kong's chest was filled with an inflatable bladder that could be expanded and contracted, again, very, very slowly, one frame at a time. And so you had that in conjunction with these other pioneering techniques like rear projection, where you've got a screen behind you that looks like the sky and you're pretending to fly a biplane or whatever. And then you had matte paintings to integrate live actors with animated sequences, all of these techniques that were really groundbreaking for the time, and they'd put them all together to create something that did wow audiences. And there are reports of some people fainting on the day. I don't know if that's necessarily completely true.
Probably haven't eaten enough. It's the depression.
Exactly. I suppose if you get 10,000 people into a venue, someone's going to keel over.
They've been in there for a while as well. Audiences were treated to a live stage show beforehand called Jungle Rhythms. I think we can all imagine the vibe there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like looking beyond, because I feel like I was mostly familiar with the final scene, but watching the rest of it, I was thinking it must have been mind-blowing to be 10 years old and see a gorilla fighting a T-Rex in the jungle. It was the Jurassic Park of its time. And actually, a lot of reviews did compare it to, you mentioned before, that 1925 silent movie, The Lost World. But the special effects team also had practical effects. You mentioned the giant mechanical hand. For the close-ups of Kong holding Anne, the character played by Fay Wray, she was put inside this mechanical hand, which was then just cranked 10 feet into the air on a crane. And she said her fear in those scenes was real because the fake fingers would start to get looser the more she struggled. Yeah. She obviously didn't want to fall 10 feet from this gigantic ape hand.
And you would just be replaced in those days, wouldn't you? You'd just be that's a shame she's paralysed. We'll find another actor.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of the other thing. King Kong spent 55 weeks in production, which would be an amazing turnaround now, but was an insanely long time in 1933. In fact, in the intervening time, Fay Wray starred in another 4 movies.
I loved, by the way, how she was pitched the role. Apparently, she was told that she was going to star opposite the tallest, darkest leading man in Hollywood. And so she thought that she was going to be with Clark Gable and signed up, and instead she got a giant mechanical ape hand. So, it worked out for her.
Despite all this success, though, no Oscar nominations for this film. There wasn't a visual effects category until 1995. So, in that sense, it was 62 years ahead of its time. But, not for the music, not for the acting, not for the screenplay, which I think you look at the dialogue and you think, well, this is hammy as hell. But actually is a very artfully created, perfect formula of a 90-minute entertainment. Nothing.
Yeah, it was written by a British mystery writer called Edgar Wallace, and he actually died after submitting the first draft. So Ernest Shudstack, who was Marion Cooper's partner, he asked his wife, Ruth Rose, to revise that draft. And she actually wrote the line, the closing line, "It wasn't airplanes, it was beauty killed the beast." That was her work. She also wrote, they immediately put a sequel into production. Some things have not changed. Didn't do as well, Son of Kong, but she wrote that as well. It was released just 9 months later. That's a more of a appropriate 1933 turnaround. She also, she wrote several more plays for Cooper and Shudstack's productions. Her last one in 1949 was Mighty Joe Young. So she certainly had a niche.
Wow,
and actually,
I thought you were going to say great-great-grandson of Kong.
Can you imagine? There's a Willis O'Brien connection to Mighty Joe Young as well, actually, because you mentioned that there was no visual effects Oscar. The Academy was so impressed by King Kong and O'Brien's work that they proposed introducing one. There weren't really many Oscars on the list at the time, so they had room to start adding in some new ones. But O'Brien insisted everyone on his team receive a statuette, and they refused. O'Brien refused to accept an individual award, so the plan was scrapped. However, they did introduce a Best Special Effects Oscar from 1940, and O'Brien was back again working with Shudstack and Cooper and Ruth Rose on Mighty Joe Young. In 1949, that won the award for Best Special Effects, and he was nominated to go up and collect it on behalf of the film. So he did finally get his moment in the spotlight.
But did he come on from the wings inside a giant ape pan? Because that should have been how that award was collected.
Now,
this episode first aired last year exclusively to members of CLUB Retrospectors.
Join today and unlock a new episode this Sunday. Patreon.com/retrospectors.